Assalamu alaikum. On June 29, 2007, Khalifatul al-Masih V continued his topic on Islamic teachings which promote global peace and security. Hazur said the Quranic teaching of peace and security is fundamentally based on taqwa, or righteousness. The Quran's constant repetition to adopt taqwa makes it impossible for true Muslims to be a source of disorder in their communities. Whether on an individual or communal level, it is unbecoming of a Muslim to shatter the existing peace. Hazur stated that the Holy Prophet, peace and blessings of Allah be upon him, was justified in taking up arms and stated there would have been dire consequences if the early Muslims had not fought in their self-defense. This fighting was only to restore peace and security. The promised Messiah, peace be upon him, said that the wars in the time of the Holy Prophet, peace and blessings of Allah be upon him, and the four righteously guided caliphs, or the Khulafa Rashidin, were fought in self-defense and as retaliation. There is no exception. Citing chapter 22, verses 40 to 41, Hazur explained that God had permitted the Muslims, who by now were an established government, to retaliate against those who initiated the war. Muslims had endured 13 years of continuous persecution and were ultimately driven from their homes. Failure to fight would have meant future oppression, injustice, and disorder. When persecution and oppression exceed all bounds, force must be used to halt it. Islam has never promoted any coercion. Religion is an individual freedom, and everyone has the right to spend his or her life in accordance with the beliefs that they choose for themselves. Muslims are commanded to protect this right, even to the extent of protecting churches, synagogues, and temples that lie within their territories. Unfortunately, some Muslim nations have violated this by allowing bigoted mullahs to threaten religious minorities and even destroy their houses of worship. Muslim nations which disobey the Quran are devoid of God's blessings. If these nations do not control their ignorant mullahs, their conflict is then against Allah. Even though Ahmadis are also persecuted in these Muslim nations, we will not respond with violence. This is the teaching of the promised Messiah, peace be upon him. The Holy Prophet, peace and blessings of Allah be upon him, stated that in the latter days, the promised Messiah will not fight using force, and fighting in general would be prohibited. Allah would arrange for the victory of the promised Messiah. Ahmadis should continue following the teachings of the Quran and preach the only kalima in Islam, which is La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah, which translates to, there is no God but Allah, and Muhammad is his messenger. After this, if other Muslims attack us in our mosques, then they fall into the category of disbelievers. The Holy Prophet, peace be upon him, stated that a Muslim who attacks another Muslim is no longer a Muslim. He also stated that anyone who calls a reciter of the kalma a disbeliever is himself a disbeliever. Hazur recited chapter 22, verse 42, and said when Islamic government is established, those in power must ensure that they do not deprive any citizen of individual freedoms. All citizens must be treated equally, and this can only happen if Muslim governments are conscious that Allah is watching over them at all times. Once the government is established, sincere worship of Allah should be observed, financial giving for social welfare, and constant promotion of good and prohibition of evil. In short, Islamic government entails indiscriminate care of all citizens, be it temporal or religious in nature. Reiterating the Quran's permission to fight, Hazur explained that fighting may only be undertaken in self-defense and is not permitted on an individual level. Fighting can only be taken up against an invading army. The Holy Prophet, peace and blessings of Allah be upon him, always ordered his army to safeguard houses of worship and civilians. Once the enemy desists, there should be no further aggression by the Muslims. This proves that Islam did not spread by the sword. One misconception Hazur addressed relates to chapter 8, verse 40, in which the phrase is stated, "And fight them until there is no persecution, and religion is wholly for Allah. Some misconstrue this to mean that Muslims should continue fighting until the entire world is Muslim. But Hazur stated that this is completely irrational. When the verse is read in context, it is clear that this is not what is meant. Religion is a matter of personal choice, and it is not up to a Muslim to coerce another. The phrase religion wholly for Allah in this verse denotes that whenever steps are taken, they are taken sincerely for Allah. Hazur spoke of another misconception that the Holy Prophet, peace and blessings of Allah be upon him, forced people into Islam. The example cited for this is that he would use the phrase, "Accept Islam and you will be secure," when he was writing to powerful and mighty kings in the region. This is misunderstood as a warning to submit to Islam or else force would be used. Hazur, however, explained that the Holy Prophet, peace be upon him, would write these letters to powerful kings, and he would write them in batches. How could it be possible for him, at a time when the Muslims were a weak and fledgling community, to take on all of these powerful and mighty kings simultaneously? The fact is, these messages were sent out of the kindness and mercy of the Holy Prophet, peace be upon him, and bear out his firm belief that only Islam can provide true peace and security to their kingdoms. Hazur then described the code of conduct in war practiced by the Holy Prophet, peace and blessings of Allah be upon him. He advised Muslims not to harm women, children, the elderly, or priests. In fact, if a young person did not use force, no force was to be used against him. The Prophet, peace be upon him, did not allow mutilation of the dead, and he forbade making a mark on a person's face during fighting. There were very clear rules regarding prisoners of war, to such a degree that Muslim households would forego meals themselves in order to feed the prisoners of war. Even young children shared their bread with those prisoners. Envoys from the enemy were accorded special respect and were pardoned for any oversights on their part. If a prisoner of war was mistreated by the Muslim side, he would be freed without any compensation. All of these facts illustrate that the early wars of Islam were to maintain freedom of conscience. Hazur ended his prayer praying that Allah enable Ahmadis to present this message of Islam to the rest of the world and bring it to the world's attention. Ameen. Assalamu alaikum.